are live on SureDog.com YouTube page, also on the podcast, all the places we record, Loudmouth MMA Podcast and the SureDog Podcast Network. We are recapping UFC Vegas 19. I am your host. My name is Keith Shillan. Joining me, as always, is Ben Duffy. Ben, how you doing, my man? I can't hear you, Ben.
I'm doing really well. Good night to be in Houston.
That's
been cold,
right.
But thanks to some hot balls, it's warming up in Houston.
There you go. So we both started off not unmuting our mic, but that kind of fit the theme of the show. It was a weird night, but actually a pretty spectacular night. You mentioned it. It was a great night if you're a Houston sports fan, as their native son, Derek Lewis, picked up a spectacular knockout. He's had some huge wins in his career, but this one might be the best one. If not, it's right up there. Derek Lewis was a big underdog against Curtis Blaydes. I thought it was a terrible stylistic matchup. What the hell do I know? Why would I ever doubt the Black Beast? The Black Beast wins by first round knockout. Now, Ben, do we give you credit or not? Because when we did the preview show, you went against your boy. Well, hold on. Actually, let me back up. When they were supposed to fight months ago, we did the preview show. You picked Derek Lewis. Then on the preview show for this one, you actually changed your mind, picked Curtis Blaydes. But I believe you, on our staff pick, you switched it back?
I certainly did. I switched it back. And on the preview, I laid out the ways that Lewis could win. It's not as though he had no hope. It's just they were unlikely cases. The most likely case was that he was going to get taken down early and often and have trouble getting back up and just get worn down and either stopped or lose a one-sided decision. I can't say I was expecting the submarine uppercut. That's a new weapon for Lewis. He's not really an uppercut guy unless he's in the clinch and just mugging you, but intercepting a takedown with an uppercut like that, not his usual thing. Could not have been more spot on. We're probably going to hear some words about the completely terrifying follow-up shots.
Oof.
But I will say that for the first second, I don't think anybody realized how out Blaydes was, because it all just sort of happened. Blaydes starts to fall, and only when he's almost about to hit the ground, you're like, oh, his legs are stiff. He is gone.
He is out. Yeah. There's so many things to talk about this fight. So let's talk about the first round. Because if anybody said Derek Lewis is going to knock out Curtis Blaydes, sure. I don't think anybody would have predicted how the first round was going to go. That Derek Lewis pretty much didn't do anything. Just stood there, backed up towards the cage. And Curtis Blaydes was teeing off on him like he was a heavy bag. Looked like he buckled him a couple times. There was some kind of weird eye pokes in there and there. But he buckled his legs a couple times and did not attempt a takedown in the first round. I know they said the UFC, they said he attempted one. I didn't see an attempt. I know in the second round he did, and then shortly after when he went for his second attempt, he got knocked out. So when I was watching the fight, I picked Blaydes. And as after the first round, I was feeling even more confident than I was when I picked him the first time, and I was very confident. I think my exact words is I think he mauls Derek Lewis. So I'll admit when I was wrong. What I didn't like when I was watching it is I hated the strategy of Derek Lewis, because to me he was really limiting his chances of. I already thought something back up. I already thought he didn't have much chance, and I thought he was limiting even more because of his style. What he was doing. He was backing himself up towards the fence and looking for one punch, and specifically that uppercut. And I said, that's it. That's your only chance. You're doing Tyron Woodley, like what we've seen in Tyron Woodley. And I was like, this is terrible. You're giving the takedowns by being next to the fence. You're not going to be able to sprawl, And though he gave himself a limited window, I got to stop doubting this guy, because he always finds a way. It almost seems, and this is just a bad analogy, but like Tim Tebow-ish, when Tim Tebow had his run in the NFL, when he was successful, where every single time I'm like, this can't work again, and then it does. I'm actually floored by Derek Lewis right now. Tell me what you thought about one, his strategy, and that he actually delivered on it.
I didn't love his strategy in the first round, but he will often embrace just kind of a weird strategy. It's almost as though he's just making it up as he goes along. And he has been with the same team, the same trainer, Crew Bob Perez, for essentially his entire career. And Perez is a good game planner. I'm sure on some level he's like having a mini stroke every time Lewis goes out there. And Lewis's first rounds are often weird. I actually liked the strategy from Blaydes. He looked sharp on the feet. He continues to improve. And on some level, yeah, he lost tonight. It's a bad one. He's going to have to win some to come back from this. Yeah. But if you think of yourself as a future title contender, a future champion, as he certainly does, and for the record, I feel the same way. I still think Curtis Blaydes will be UFC champion at some point. I still believe that. Just instead of 2022, it might be 2024 now. Yeah. You can't do that as a one-dimensional fighter. So no. I think he might be making conscious efforts to broaden his skills. Just get reps against a live top 10, top 5 level opponent, just working his skills. And for what it's worth, he wasn't in much danger on the feet.
No.
He looked like when he was in real danger was every time he changed levels.
He was doing well. He was jabbing. He was stinging him with a jab. At one point, it looked like Lewis' legs buckled. He was kind of just keeping him at bay. He looked really good. And you talked about, UFC champion but one-dimensional. Like, when was the last time we had a one-dimensional heavyweight champion? I mean, probably
Lesnar.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Probably Brock Lesnar. But Brock Lesnar was also at the right place at the right time. He was a fellow wrestler, Randy Couture, who was a champion. It was a guy. It was also a very small heavyweight. I mean, the guy fought, half his career at light heavyweight, or a big portion of his career at light heavyweight. So, it was always like the perfect storm. That's not the case with the heavyweight division now. We have well-rounded guys. There's all different types of guys. We got new blood, which we'll get into tonight. So, I liked Blaydes' strategy a lot too, especially when he threw a punch to start the second and immediately shot. And I'm like, this is brilliant. You open up, you win the first round. Lewis goes back to his corner. I'm assuming his cornerman's like, hey, open it up a little bit. Like, this guy, maybe he's not just going to wrestle you. He's going to stop striking. And then he shoots immediately. But credit to Lewis. I know he joked about being an All-American wrestler this week. He stuffed the takedown. I mean, he stopped it. He circled away. He waited, and then he landed that uppercut. And what's funny about that uppercut, when in the history of MMA, you get the, which style would win, blah, blah, blah. And, I know you come from a wrestling background. I come from a wrestling background. I'm very biased towards wrestlers. I do think it's the most dominant martial arts style when you look over the overall history of who's been champion. But you always get those dream fantasy matchups, and you get this boxing champion, and the people who disrespect wrestlers will say oh man, all you gotta do is when the guy shoots in is just uppercut him while he comes in, and I'm like, dude, that just doesn't happen. Well, tonight it actually did happen because he timed it perfect. So all those times I said, oh, Mike Tyson wouldn't land that uppercut on insert wrestler or whatever, maybe I was wrong. Good for Derek Lewis.
Well, it's kind of like we said in the preview. If it was easy to do, more people would do it. You don't very often see an elite wrestler just intercepted with a perfectly timed uppercut like that. Like I even said on the preview, if he does it, it's probably with a knee. He has a good step-in knee. He's been throwing flying knees more recently. If this happens, that's how it happens. But, hey, hooray for the uppercut. And it was for a guy who's hooks, can go a little wide and loopy in Lewis, that was a tight uppercut.
Yeah.
Normally, when I think big heavyweight uppercut, I think was it Volkov on Verdum, where he threw a rear hand uppercut, and it looked like something from a movie. It was spectacular to watch because the arc was so enormous, but technically, except that it worked, it was terrible.
Yeah.
Lewis, this was tight. It landed perfectly. I think that's part of the reason there was a hint of delay before everyone realized how dead Blaydes was. Yeah, but nice, beautiful punch.
It was short. Not that I need to take anything away from Derek Lewis's power. It speaks for itself, but also the momentum of Blaydes coming into it, between him coming forward and Lewis connecting. It's just head-on collision. It reminded me, and I know it's a little different below, but the timing of Francis Ngannou on Cain Velasquez in that fight. Like, it reminded me a lot of that fight. So, in a weird sense, like Derek Lewis's skill set, we talked about this on the preview. His skill set has always been kind of overlooked. He's always been known as a guy who, he has big power, but not that skilled. And we always said it's gonna be rough. Then when you see something like this tonight, now I feel like that narrative is going to be even more stretched. Like next time when we're breaking down his skills again, we're going to have to be like, no, he's not just a one-punch knockout guy. Like he actually does have a lot of skills. He has like a very Yoel Romero blitzing style. He's improved his takedown defense. His stand-up, scramble game is elite at this point. Like all these little things. His athleticism he doesn't get a credit for. Like I feel like now it's going to be even more. Are you agree with me on that or?
I'm totally with you on that. I think that Lewis's skill set is underrated because of how he looks, because of how he acts, because he acts kind of like just I'm the slow talking Houston guy from Louisiana, and I joke around a lot, and I always tell the same story about this is the time my back finally feels better, and I had a great camp. He cultivates it. He almost invites people to underestimate him.
Yeah.
But yeah, he is creeping up the list of greatest heavyweights never to win a major title. And I even as a fan from way back in the LFA days, would not have pictured that, especially when he came into the UFC, immediately lost badly to Sean Jordan, who'd also beaten him here on the local scene. I was like, well, this will be fun for a few fights while it lasts. And 15 knockouts later,
I think I picked Gabriel Gonzaga to beat him. So, going way back in those days. You talked about, one of the greatest heavyweights to never win a title. I mean, he won, if I'm correct, I'm not the stat guy like Jay Petrie is, but I think they were saying in the broadcast, he now has the most knockouts of any fighter in any division. Is that true?
I would have to check.
Okay, I think they said that on the broadcast, but we're going to talk about things they said wrong on the broadcast because there was another stat they threw out there. If anybody's in the chat, there's a couple guys in the chat. If that is true or anybody has the time to look it up, can you just confirm that? Because I think that's what they said. He now has the most knockouts. I don't know if it's all overall history or just in a single weight class or what.
Well, I mean, he had already been the heavyweight leader in knockouts.
Yeah. And they said something about Vitor Belfort, like either tied him or maybe he surpassed him now.
And see, Belfort's would have been across a couple of weight classes.
That's true.
Okay. Hey, you call the name of Petrie and lo, he appears. Lewis has 12 knockouts, tied with Vitor for the all-time UFC record. He has the most at heavyweight because, of course, Vitor went on that murder spree at middleweight, like TRT, Mullet Vitor. Yeah.
So he's tied overall for most knockouts ever. It's probably safe to say that Vitor Belfort will never fight in the UFC again, and Derek Lewis will probably knock somebody out again one more time before his career in the UFC is over. So he'll probably be the all-time knockout leader. He's already the all-time knockout leader in a single weight class at heavyweight, but also in just one weight class because you figure Belfort played at, he fought at middleweight, he fought at light heavyweight, and then even during the tournament days, he's actually technically was a heavyweight too. Knocking out guys like Tank Abbott. Plus, it's also to his credit, it's a different world now than when Vitor, especially when Vitor first started. Now, Vitor, I'm not calling him a journeyman or I should more say a pioneer from the old days because he's one of the few guys who did transcend like different times. But some of those early knockouts was like Tank Abbott and
John Hess
and Scott Ferroso and like not Curtis Blaydes.
Right.
So he's got that record. Francis Ngannou has scary power. Like, just he touches you, you're going out. Derek Lewis doesn't knock people out as quick as Francis Ngannou, but it's pretty safe to say they have the same punching power.
I think that's fair to say.
Okay, all right. I just want to put that because we always talk about we would say who's the scariest hitter in MMA. Like Francis Ngannou's name always gets brought up. Derek Lewis's name doesn't. Until that fight week. Then, like, this week we talk about Derek Lewis power, but, like, a month from now, it'll be Francis Ngannou if he lands. When you look at Francis Ngannou and you say, regardless, like the matchup with Stipe, if he hasn't improved his wrestling, he's probably going to lose. But he still has that ability. Just he touches you, you can be out. Which I'm still doubting Lewis and the fact that he'll ever win a title. But if I say that about Ngannou, don't I also have to say that about Lewis?
Sure. And if anything, Lewis has more weapons in the bag than Ngannou does.
Yeah. And I mean, not the best fight ever, but he actually technically has a win over him too. So
yeah, one of the worst fights ever, but it was recent. I mean, it counts. We'll be talking on the Sherdog editorial side about what we're going to do rankings wise in the wake of these fights, and that Lewis win over Ngannou, it's going to factor into the conversation because it wasn't 8 years ago. You know, it was pretty recent.
Yeah, no, it was. You know, I've had to guess like 3 years ago, give or take.
Jay Petrie wants to know: Will we have to see Lewis Ngannou 2 before this is all over? Are they going to fight again at some point?
You know, I don't know. Like, they know it was a fight was so bad that I feel like they would have to know they have to pick it up. It's funny because I was watching this fight with my wife, and the first 2 or 3 minutes was a feeling out process, and she's like, and you know, she's not even a casual fan. She's like, "Wow, they got to do something," and I'm like, if you were Curtis Blaydes, would you go into that fire? You know, and I kind of pointed at it, and she was like, "Oh yeah, it's easy for us to say, yeah, go in there, start throwing punches. Yeah, you might land that big shot, but or you might not, and the other guy might land." Let's talk about Blaydes for a second. Now, you jumped on the wagon that he's only 30 years old, so obviously he's still very young. He just turned 30. I think it was Thursday, just 2 days ago. He just turned 30. He's still very young. He still has a long career. But here's a question I got to start asking: when we start looking at his losses, it's been to these big power punchers, to Francis Ngannou, to obviously Derek Lewis. Do we start questioning his chin? Is that fair for me to start questioning his chin?
I'm inclined to give his chin a pass for I mean, who is the hardest hitter in MMA history is a pointless discussion.
Of course.
But I can't think of anybody that wouldn't put those two at least in their top 10.
They're in the Mount Rushmore.
And I'm not even just talking about go to the Performance Institute and like punch the bag like Drago and see the PSI.
Yeah.
I mean, just functional in cage power. That uppercut tonight would have knocked out an ox.
Yeah. So a lot of times, guys, if you're in the chat, I ask these questions to start a conversation. It's not necessarily my opinion, and then I kind of share my opinion afterwards. I agree exactly what we've been saying. Like, yeah, like if it was a lesser puncher, then I would start questioning it. And I am going to question some other guys' chins later on. But being who he's been knocked out by. And I don't remember Blaydes being visibly hurt by somebody else. And I could be wrong. I don't have every memory. You know, like, was there another time where he was hurt badly and had to, like, come back and win?
No, and in fact, I remember thinking during the Overeem fight that, hey, he's been caught clean a few times this fight, and he seems to be fine.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, Overeem, he's not quite on that Lewis Ngannou level, but certainly he has power in every limb, every point.
Yeah, I mean, you're talking about a former K1 Grand Prix champion, you know, and one of, you know, we talked about Derek Lewis being one of the greatest heavyweights to never win a championship. You know, the UFC championship. Alex Overeem might be the greatest to never win the UFC heavyweight champion. And we're not going down that lane. I'm sure this people could throw out other people. So let's do this. So,
Dream and Strikeforce were major. What are you guys talking about?
No. I said, I know. I don't know if you caught me because I read away. I said, oh yeah, wait, yeah. I caught myself and had to change it to UFC because of course Alex Overeem did win major championships. One time he had like every belt over his shoulder. So Derek Lewis is on like the quietest, but not really. Because when you look at what he's done, but he's on a 4-fight winning streak in the UFC. He's got. I mean, the way he knocked out Derek Lewis, what he did to Alexei Olenek, you know, he's on an impressive run. The problem here is the UFC heavyweight division. There's a lot of this is to blame. It's to blame on two people. A lot of it's to blame for Stipe Miocic, who's not a very active champion. And a lot of it has to do now. Suddenly you have John Jones who jumps the line because it's freaking John Jones, and if anybody's ever deserved to get an instant title shot, it's probably the greatest fighter ever, at least in the conversation for greatest fighter ever. What do you do with Lewis now? Because based on what he's done, this run is just as good as the run that got him the title shot against Daniel Cormier. And you can make the argument, and you would have made the same argument with Curtis Blaydes. He would have been on a 5-fight winning streak if he won. When you look at Stipe and Nagano's fighting in April, you figure the winner, we'll just say, say Stipe, say he wins. When's the earliest turnaround? August?
At best,
July?
Considering I have to imagine the UFC will put some pressure on Miocic to get back in there quickly, because now you've got John Jones kind of elbowing his way to the front of the line.
Sure.
You knew that a very deserving contender was going to come out of tonight's fight, and it was going to be a contender that, in either case, had not fought Miocic yet.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they both fought in gun. So there was going to be pressure on Miocic to get back in there quickly if he ends up winning.
And I definitely think there's a little more motivation to face John Jones than it is to face a guy you've already beat. And not only did you already beat, but you beat him fairly recently in a one-sided fight. So if we agree mid-summer, late summer is probably your best chance of turnaround. So say Stipe or John Jones, whoever, or Francis Ngannou, whoever wins, whoever ends up being the champion by the end of the summer. Now you get Derek Lewis, and that if he doesn't take another fight, we're talking fall, maybe winter. I mean, if his fights in
realistically, I'm thinking end of the year.
Yeah.
If Lewis just wants to sit, if the UFC says you've earned a title shot, you don't have to take another fight if you don't want. Just sit tight and also be ready to step in if somebody gets injured or sick in these upcoming fights. He probably doesn't get the title shot until November or December.
Yeah. So I always think, yep, go ahead, sorry.
Just these fights could happen like 3 months apart, but they won't. Something will happen.
No.
Something always happens.
And that's the other thing. We're saying perfect scenario. We're saying best case, we get no injuries, we get quick turnaround, there's no contract dispute, there's no COVID problems. It's like, I think most fighters say they want to fight about 3 times a year, sometimes 4, but the title champions, they're going to not fight as much 3 times a year. Well, 3 times a year is every 4 months. So we figure April, okay, May, June, July, August. Then 4 more months, you're talking December. So we're saying, yep. Do you really want to put Derek Lewis on the shelf until December?
I can't imagine, and I can't imagine he wants to.
Yeah. Okay.
He is 36, and he wants to make money. He wants to.
Yeah.
The actual fight is the only thing he enjoys about this. For a guy that's as funny as he is, he hates doing the media stuff. Not overly fond of the training part.
Yeah.
He likes to fight. He likes to knock people the fuck out. He doesn't want to wait like 8 months for his next fight.
Yeah, he's not Sean Shirk in the gym, like loving it. Like I remember when they used to do those. What was those with Rachel Leah? They used to do those shows. I forget what it was called. What they did the behind the scenes, and they would have like 20 minutes of their training and then like 10 minutes of like home stuff, and they like had Sean Shirk, and they're like, oh, he didn't do home stuff, he just trains. Like that's not Derek Lewis. Like Derek Lewis.
No.
You remember that show I'm talking about?
Yes, and we actually have some word from Lewis from the post-fight presser.
Okay.
Lewis, he talked to Laura Sanko, said he doesn't want to wait. He doesn't expect to fight for the belt next. He called out Overeem.
Okay.
And Jay, also man on the spot. I'm just going to start calling him the honorary producer and probably like send him a case of beer because he's such a lifesaver on these shows. But Curtis Blaydes being hurt. In 2018, Mark Hunt did drop him in the first round. Blaydes recovered well enough to land 10 takedowns, but Mark Hunt's another guy that's way up there on that list of the hardest hitters.
That's right.
And when they say power's the last thing to go, for Hunt it literally was the last thing to go. He could still crack right up until age 43 or whenever.
And I'm sure he still can crack. John Franklin, when we used to do the show with him, I love this analogy. He said, like, we wouldn't get into discussion like rank this 1, 2, or 3, but we'd say like the club. If you have the club, this is the club of hardest hitters, and there's a bouncer at the door. Are you letting Mark Hunt in? Mark Hunt's getting in the club.
Yep.
Derek Lewis, he's getting in the club. Francis Ngannou, he's getting in the club. So so that's a great point. And that fact that he did recover makes me feel a little bit better about it. So Derek Lewis, as you mentioned, he wants to come back, so we're not going to wait for it. If he did say, I'm going to sit out, wait for a title, he probably justified it. What surprises me, though, is that he called for Overeem. It doesn't. I understand it would be a very nice fight night main event, but when you think about the rankings, you think about where both their careers are. Alex Overeem just got knocked out.
He did. The only reason I like this is because Lewis has already earned a title shot. Because Overeem is someone, it is a big name, and that would be a good matchup. Overeem makes a lot of money, so if he wants to stick around, they need to get him in at least semi-marquee matchups. But Overeem's not in any sort of direct line for a title shot. Like if they put Lewis up against, say, the winner of Gane versus Rosenstrike next week, Lewis might knock out a perfectly viable title contender. Yeah. A guy that might be on his way to a title shot in 2022 instead gets pushed back to the back of the line.
Yeah.
So I like that. It's low stakes for the UFC's kind of title picture. Like when we talk about win-win matchmaking scenarios, I don't think it's a win-win for Overeem, but
Yeah. Yeah. See, I understand what you're saying that, but I feel like because it's so logjam, and that we're both usually on the same sense in this, where we're both thinking long term. We kind of usually in agreement, but to me, because it's so logjam, I'm okay with people who could be in the line knocking each other out to kind of lessen the logjam. Because by end of the year, early next year, there'll be new guys who rise, or the guy like Curtis Blaydes who lost could win 2 more fights from there, kind of be back in the picture. Like, that's why I'm okay with him facing someone a little higher. So let's get into that. You like the Overeem. Like, that's what you would pick if you were running the UFC?
I would never have thought of it. And frankly, I don't know what Overeem's going to do next. He looked to me like a guy who was a little bit checked out in his last fight. And that's one thing that I could never say about him, win or lose, up until that last fight. But just came out, threw almost no offense, went into the shell almost immediately. We're both kind of the same opinion about the shell. Like, it got him to a certain point. It extended his career, but
that's right.
That's not. He's not getting to a title shot with the shell, and he went to it like within the first minute of that fight. Just to, I might find an opportunity and zap out and win this thing, but mostly I'm just trying not to get clobbered here.
He was on borrowed time. Like, he was on borrowed time.
Yeah,
it's like playing roulette, and you bet black. Eventually, it's gonna hit red. Like, it's like he or odd, even. I know people do that. Like, yeah, you're gonna win some, but you're gonna lose some. The one thing that's intriguing, and which was what made this matchup intriguing, is if you could find a weakness, and we both are on the more, it's not as big a weakness as people think it is side of Lewis. Of if you could take him down, and really the only person who's been able to take him down and hold him down is Daniel Cormier, an all-time great fighter, an all-time great wrestler. Alistair Overeem, we've both been in agreement for a long time, is so good on the ground if he can get you down. That's what would make it intriguing. But at this point, I think I don't trust the chin anymore. That shell, like, I couldn't imagine standing there backing against the cage, covering up behind his shell, and having Lewis throwing those bombs at him. I would do the Volkov rematch. I think Volkov's done enough to kind of earn it. He was winning that fight. There's an intriguing backstory to that because of it. Volkov can say, I'm better than this guy. I beat him for 14 and a half minutes, or 14 minutes and 45 seconds, or how many seconds were left in the matchup. That's what I would do. And then the winner of that really would be in line for end of December, early next year matchup. Title shot.
I would be absolutely fine with that. Like I said, I wouldn't have thought of the Overeem matchup, but as soon as they said it, I'm like, you know what? I don't hate that if all interested parties actually want to do it. I like the Volkov rematch. That's fine as well. Or, like I said, the winner of Rosenstrike versus Gahn is getting up there.
Yeah. Yeah.
I wouldn't want to do that just because.
Yeah.
You know, why saddle Gahn with a loss? Why saddle Rosenstrike with another loss? Because they're both still developing fighters. But like, I wouldn't hate that either, and I could see the UFC doing it.
Yeah. So there's a lot of guys watching us on YouTube right now in the chat and stuff. Guys, throw out in the chat. Tell us what you would do with Lewis left. Like, now this is not of who does he want. It's not a, you know, he's not going to take this fight. This is, you have unlimited power. You pick. We're doing a dictatorship right now. If you were matchmaking, who would you put Derek Lewis in? And actually, give us who would you do Blaydes, because we're going to talk about Blaydes real quick. To me, Blaydes, finding a matchup for him is a lot harder now, because I've always tried to find a way to, when a guy comes up for a loss, to give him a tough test, but a winnable matchup to kind of get him back in the fray. But the other thing that happens is Curtis Blaydes, because he was on this long winning streak, he kind of beat everybody. He beat Volkov. He beat, like, you know, these top guys. He beat Overeem. So to me now, it's like it either gets into the couple of guys we saw win tonight, who's now you having to take a huge step up in competition from your from your Andre Arlovskis and your Alexei Olenek. Do you want to do that? Or do you do it, okay, we have Francis Ngannou number 1 in line. We got John Jones number 2 in line. We got, if I'm going my way, Louis Volkov, winner of 3 in line. Now Blaydes versus winner of Gahn Rosenstrike 4th in line. Like, you start making that? Like, are you doing it like the deli? Or like, that's what I would do. Blaydes versus winner of Rosenstrike Gahn. What would you do with Blaydes?
I was going to say versus the loser of that one, but that's because I was kind of preparing myself mentally for the winner having to fight Lewis. But I would be fine with either person who comes out of that taking out Blaydes, because 1, he hasn't fought either of them. 2, it's an important test, because the takedown defense is the one thing that neither Rosenstrike nor Gahn has really had tested at a high level. Yeah. And obviously they're both guys that they both can crack like hell. So
let me pick your brain. We're going to move on. The rest of the card obviously is not. We're not going to spend as much time, but there's some fights we're going to breeze through. But in your scenario, so it's Lewis versus the winner of Gahn Rosenstrike, Blaydes versus the loser of the matchup, and then you were doing Lewis Overeem. I'm sorry, Lewis Overeem. Blaydes versus loser, and then would it be Volkov versus the winner of Gahn Rosenstrike?
I like that. I mean, we're getting to the point where all of these moving parts like fit together for me just fine. I would avoid rematches where possible, unless there's a good reason to run it back, and that's about it. Yeah,
it's weird because when Daniel Cormier moved up to fight Stipe Miocic, other than that matchup, this seemed like there was like a dead lull at heavyweight, and now it's like a very intriguing division again. Where
it's intriguing. We've got forever. Blaydes was the only guy under 30, like even within screaming distance of the top 15 or 20, and now, well, hell, we had two guys.
We had 3 guys from 31 down.
Yeah.
Because I was waiting for Blaydes to win, and in my bulls was going to be young heavyweights, and then he kind of blew that. So it's suddenly an intrigue, and we haven't talked about the other talent that won tonight. There's, it's just a fun division right now. So let's move on to the co-main event. Well, you're all set to move on, right?
We are. Let me just pop in with an item of news real quick. Our performance of the night bonuses: Lewis, Chris Daukaus, Tom Aspinall, Eamon Zahabi. Tough night to pick only 4.
So it was Lewis, of course.
Daukaus.
Of course.
Tom Aspinall.
And
Eamon Zahabi.
Yeah. I'm trying to think. Is there anybody who gets... No, I don't think anybody... Yeah. Oh, wait a minute. Julian Rosa didn't get anything?
Julina Rosa didn't. John
Oh,
Castaneda,
that's gonna be
John
the first time-
Castaneda didn't.
That's going to be the first time in history a guy throws a flying knee knockout and doesn't get a performance bonus. But
In under a minute, yeah.
You know what? It was in spectacular card. Let's move on to the co-main event. This is where I really want guys to chat on now. I'll kind of give people the results. This was the most controversial. It wasn't a robbery. So let's throw it out there. It wasn't a robbery. At least I don't think it was a robbery. Do you agree with that before we go on to who you scored it for?
I don't think the overall result was a robbery, but I still think it was extra stupid and just kind of a general travesty and piece of bad judging. And this is the reason why. I am fine if you want to argue that Yana Kunitskaya won the final round. That's fine. Okay. You know, like, she really came on strong at the end. If the round was a minute longer, maybe she would have finished it. But if you want to say that trumps what Vieira did for the first, 3.5 or 4 minutes, I'm fine with that. Yeah. My problem is that one of the judges gave Kunitskaya the first round.
Yeah. So let's get into it. So it was a very close battle. I scored it for Vieira. I scored it 29-28. I was very confident she was going to get that. I actually kind of started writing up little notes on before they announced it as the winner. I actually had a tweet going out. Luckily, I didn't send it. How did you score it?
I scored it for Vieira.
Okay.
I gave her the first round. I gave Kunitskaya the second round. I thought both of those were pretty clear cut. I gave Vieira the third round, but again, I'm open to somebody who wants to argue that Kunitskaya stole the round just by doing more damage.
Yeah. So
over a shorter period of time.
I feel the same exact way. So I scored it exactly the same way. Guys, tell us who you guys scored it for. I had it the same exact way, but I'm okay with the argument that Kunitskaya stole the round because of the damage. I mean, she did some serious damage in just those few seconds she was on top. So, you start weighing what was more effective, the damage she got in the last couple minutes or the amount of serious grappling that was going on. I just have a hard time. This is my, why I gave it to Vieira. I had a hard time seeing her win about 4 minutes and 30 seconds, maybe 4 minutes and 45 seconds of that round, and then lose it in the last minute. And she was, she was cut open with a beautiful elbow, but it wasn't like we see on the feet where someone's standing up and they're rocked and they're stumbling and they're doing the chicken leg around the cage and they saved by the belt. Like, that wasn't the case. Like, if there was another, minute of that fight, like, she would take more damage for another minute. Like, the referee wasn't jumping in to stop it. There was a time where grappling was everything, and now I feel like the pendulum's starting to go a little too far the other way, where we're kind of ignoring grappling. I mean, I heard people say that wasn't effective. There were some dominant positions, but Vieira had her back at one point. She had the mount at one point. Like, it wasn't a lay-in. Like, she wasn't landing shots, but she was trying to set up submissions. She was passing guard. She was doing things. Like, it wasn't just holding down Mark Coleman, head in your chest, and not, resting. So you were in agreement.
Completely agree. Yeah. I'm just that I'm pretty sure it was Eric Colomb that gave Kunitskaya the first round. So his card in the end looks fine, 29-28, but just getting individual rounds that wrong, even if you get the right result, it's like playing darts in the dark. Like, you might hit the target every once in a while, but you don't deserve to.
Yeah.
The process has to matter.
Yeah. Shout out to some of the guys in the chat. We got Superhero Villain. We got our buddy Zebra Cheeks. We got Ace Garrison. I love these names. These names are fantastic. Ace, like
Zebra.
Yeah.
The only one in the entire Sherdog Pick'em who picked Kunitskaya to win.
Yeah.
So he sure doesn't think it's a robbery. Yeah. He's walking around like he owns the place now.
Great call. Ace Garrison said he didn't pay attention close enough to really say for sure, but he basically said damage trumps all. So under that, I'm assuming he gave it to Kunitskaya. So let's actually talk about the X's and O's for a second. So the clinch to me was an area where I saw Kunitskaya could win. We talked about that, but I said, oh, that's a really strong area for Vieira. But that was not, like, pre-tape study, that was a strong area for Vieira. It wasn't tonight. That was a safety zone for Kunitskaya. However, it was almost like a double-edged sword because she got in that close where she could land knees, but because of that, she's in close enough where Vieira can now grab a leg, get a takedown. So I'm looking at my note. I'm literally all my notes are pro Vieira. Does she get a title shot? Notes. It came down to who had the top control, and then at the end of the first round, it was Kunitskaya. Like, there really anything else to add to this?
I was shocked by how strong Ketlen Vieira is. I know that she's strong, and I know she comes from a judo background, and so you even have more core strength than it looks like you should because of all those reps. But, I mean, Kunitskaya is basically the stronger woman in almost every single one of her fights. She looks like a fucking superhero. And the very first exchange, the first takedown, Kunitskaya had an overhook, and I was like, okay, she's safe here. She's not going to go to the ground unless she wants. And Vieira just kind of scoops her up like somebody taking an angry toddler out of a grocery store and just kind of like sets her down. I'm like, holy shit. That's all I really had to say.
I was impressed with when I saw her throw Sarah McMahon. When you throw a Olympic silver medalist from the judo clinch, I was like, wow, that's the position. So that's when we talked about in the preview. Like I was saying, the clinch is usually the best area, and Kunitskaya being bigger, being stronger, like for once not being the bigger and stronger one, that she'd have a hard time. But regardless of how you scored it, it was still a good showing for Kunitskaya, in my opinion. Because of she was a big. I mean, we talked about on the preview show that neither one of us thought she should have been as big of an underdog as she was.
Nope, didn't think she should have been as big an underdog as she was, and even like in the 30 seconds that I was preparing after the final bell before they read the decision, in which I was preparing to talk about this fight as though she lost a close decision, we decided we were going to match make this, and I had the same person for whoever won. I think either one would be the perfect person to welcome Raquel Pennington back in May or June when she comes back.
Okay. Because my next question was, so here's my question. Because the division, especially up top, there is not someone leading the pack. And then you have a dominant champion in Amanda Nunes, who's...
every time someone looks like they're going to lead the pack, Holly Holm comes back and kicks their ass.
I know. And then they give Juliana Pena to Holly Holm, too, on top of it. So Amanda Nunes is fighting Megan Anderson in 2 weeks. I'm assuming we're both probably going to take, I don't want to give away our picks, but we're probably both going to take Amanda Nunes to win. But regardless, she's going to have to defend the belt eventually at bantamweight. Right now, if Amanda Nunes wins, and I know we're going off a rabbit hole, way off topic, but 2 weeks from now, we're going to be doing matchmaking, and we're going to have to pick. And say Amanda Nunes says, I want to fight at bantamweight. Who gets the title shot? She's beaten Holly Holm. She's beaten Jermaine Durrani. She's beat Raquel Pennington. I mean, Juliana Pena is booked now. Like, basically, my long runaround is like, is it Kunitskaya? Like, if Amanda Nunes says 2 weeks from now, I want to return in June. She wants a quick turnaround. Is Kunitskaya now the challenger?
She might be on in terms of deserve, in terms of what they like, what kind of streak they're on, what they've done, say in the last 2 years or so. It's not the one I'd most want to see. I mean, the one I would most want to see is still probably Irene Aldana, even though she just got lanced by Holly Holm, just because, Holm did that to her, but Nunes and Holm are different fighters, and I'm still a believer in Aldana, but you can't do that because she just got knocked out. Just so many of these young guns have been taken down by somebody. Aspen Ladd, like, it was a weird and short fight, but
yeah.
I mean, she's beaten Kunitskaya, I guess. You could make the argument that
you could
like she's lost 17 seconds of her first 5 UFC fights, basically.
Yeah. So the thing with some of the comments we're getting is obviously the Valentina Shevchenko is the one who'd get it. We've seen that matchup.
When people are calling for a trilogy fight, you know that your division is cleaned out.
Yeah, and
when they're calling for someone to come from another division and give you like a trilogy fight,
that's
and
right.
You already won the first 2.
Yeah, and the problem is we have not only does Amanda Nunes is a trilogy, but Amanda Nunes is up 2-0, and let's not forget the second match was terrible. Like, people, I seem like I'm the only one who remembers how bad the second matchup was.
It wasn't great, and that was the one that was really close. Also,
Yeah.
That some people want to argue that Nunes didn't even win it.
Yeah. All right, let's move on. Wow, what a fun fight we had before that. Charles Rosa versus Derek Minner. So I said in the preview that, like, why is this placed on the main card? Like, it didn't make sense in the regular sets. I guess this is why, because it was an action-packed, absolute fun. If you don't like grappling, you're bored. Like, this is the fight that kind of wins you over, in my opinion. Like, this was some really fun exchanges. And to me, the reason why Derek Minner beat Charles Rosa was just his pressure. Like, besides winning the grappling, he was coming at him, pressuring him, getting takedowns. He was actually beating him up on the feet. And I don't think he's a more technical striker. It was because Charles Rosa wasn't ready to be backpedaling. And then as soon as he landed a shot, he'd jump on a takedown, get a takedown, and then he just started running a gauntlet on Charles Rosa. Is it time to, like, we say Charles Rosa's a black belt, but this is 2 times in recent history we've seen him on the ground get mauled.
And this was a worse mauling than the camo shorts guy fight. His name always escapes me.
Bryce Mitchell.
Thank you. Thug Nasty. Why can't I cannot remember at least Thug Nasty? All I can remember is his pants. Something's wrong with me. Anyway, this was worse than that. I mean, Mitchell just big brothered him. Like, Rosa was clearly frustrated. You could hear him like trying to taunt Mitchell into letting him up and just striking with him. Minner put Rosa through the ringer. He was constantly, you talk about pressure. He delivered pressure on the feet for sure. He delivered constant pressure on the ground. Just because Rosa's whole thing was, and I don't know if he could have gotten up because Minner is a very good wrestler. Minner clearly a physically strong dude. And I'm going to issue an apology here in a moment for underrating his grappling, but I don't know if Rosa could get up. I know he barely tried. He was just bent on throwing up low percentage subs from the bottom. Mm-hmm. Leg locks. Kimura's like really kind of out of position. He kept on spinning to that to a north-south type position, where he could attack with leg locks. He could attack with inverted triangles. But every time he tried, Minner got out pretty easily and then punished him. Try an armbar, I'm going to take your back again. Minner just, it was a clinic. I had a miserable night picking fights. I went 5 for 12. I don't care because Houston won, but this is the fight I was most wrong about in terms of how I thought it was going to look. I underestimated Minner's grappling. I watched the regional fights and I was like, okay, this is a really athletic guy with a great quick guillotine. And instead he just put on a clinic. It was a top control clinic. And yeah, dominance.
Yeah, so before, the thing I was worried about Minner was the cardio. Like you pointed out in the preview, was the cardio. I don't think that's the case anymore. Like, we throw that out because to be heavy grappling he was and going as hard as he was and still going for submission attempts deep in the third. And he was trying to finish this fight at all points. 14 minutes in, 15 minutes in, he was trying to finish this fight. The reason why I went with Minner was simply the wrestling advantage because he wrestled in NCAAs. I believe he was a D1 wrestler. And Charles Rosa is a terrible wrestler. He's always been a terrible wrestler because he trusts his jiu-jitsu so much. And now you have a guy who can match his jiu-jitsu. Just a terrible night for Charles Rosa. So you're excited that Houston did well. Well, my hometown guy got absolutely mauled.
But at least that I'm aware of, the only police officer on the card did very well for himself.
He did do it. And just for your record, this is not Walmart headphones. These are iPhone headphones. Just to respond to someone in the chat who's, I think he called you gay, and I have cheap headphones or something like that. I don't know. Well. Fantastic. Anyways, I appreciate it. Yeah, so good transition. We had Chris Daukaus getting a first round TKO of Alexei Oleinik. So let's go. Let's rewind all the way back to the Parker Porter fight. When he first came in the UFC, we were making jokes. Like, I picked him to. I think we both picked him to beat Parker Porter, but we weren't confident that he would beat Parker Porter. I can't. Who was it? Was it Rodrigo Nascimento? He beat in the second one, and then in the third fight, he's beat Alexei Oleinik. He's now 3-0 in the UFC with 3 first-round knockouts. I'm going to give you 2 options. Tell me which camp you're in. And you can't say somewhere in between, as I like to do when you ask me the question. Is Daukaus a legit heavyweight threat, someone to be excited about? Or has he faced 2 tomato cans and a very old, aging Olenek who's on his last leg? Which camp is it?
Daukaus is a threat.
Okay.
All I'll qualify that by saying is he's a threat in that he wins one more fight and he's at least a top 15 heavyweight.
Yeah.
I don't know if he's a future title contender. I mean, we just spent 20 minutes talking about how there's suddenly a logjam of really deserving guys up there.
Yeah.
So it may just be a question of timing. He's going to have to beat some really tough people before he gets into that situation himself. But I thought this was going to be a squash match. I thought Olenek was going to run through him. I was dead wrong, and part of that might be that Olenek is aging, but Daukaus looked great, dude. As soon as he stepped out onto the scale and he's 234 pounds, because I even kind of made a joke on the preview. It's like, he just kind of looks like a regular dumpy dude.
Yeah.
In, like a somewhat decent shaped guy. He's looking better.
Yeah. He did that in his second fight. He lost a lot of weight between his first UFC one and his second one. What I liked about this match, so I put the question to you: if I have to pick, I'm going to agree with you. I want to be in the camp that this is a nice heavyweight addition, but I'm still more. If I give the option, like I'd be in between. I'm still have some question marks about him. What I liked though, besides the athleticism by the seats, is just like moments of intelligence. Like when he was pushed up in the cage, he didn't panic. He kind of got his elbow in, kind of worked position. At one point, Olenek almost like tried to pull guard. He like refused to kind of fall into his trap, play that game because he knows even on his back, Olenek can still get that Ezekiel choke or whatever. He also, when he was defending, he was hitting elbow in. He was landing some good shots. But what I liked about it is when he hurt him, he didn't rush it, because if you rush it against him, you overthrow something, then he can get his takedown. So he actually, in a sense, he hurt him once, and then he actually got tighter. He actually said, I'm going to be more technical. Actually took some off his punches, because when you hurt someone, you don't have to land a huge shot afterwards. Now you can hit a shot that's 60-70% of what your 100% shot. So he actually became a little more technical, and I'd love to see that, which I was like, wow, that was a really smart showing. And this is a guy who just got in the UFC to kind of show that resilience. It's just kind of like a veteran move. I like Daukaus. Now, what I want to see, now I'm going to jump over to Aspinall, because I've heard people mention in like Daukaus and Aspinall. Aspinall kind of called for the Daukaus fight. I don't want these two guys to face each other. I want them to do the opposite. I want them to face the veterans. Like, I would like to see one versus, say, Junior Dos Santos, the other one against all over him. Like, they're both going to get those higher level. I just don't want to beat each other. What do you think?
I'm fine with that. They're early enough in their careers that, we don't need to crash these cars together at this point. They're both young, both really still developing. Yeah. Aspinall in particular, he's not the same fighter he was just a couple years ago.
So let's do that. Let's jump the Hawes fight. We'll go back to that in a second. We're going to jump to Arlovski Aspinall, because we were kind of already going down that part. They kind of linked together. This was a very heavyweight-oriented card. We had 4 heavyweight matchups. One of the guys mentioned in the chat that JDS is washed up. Yeah, that's exactly why I would match him against a guy coming up. You give the young guy a win over a name. Anyways, Andrei Arlovski versus Tom Aspinall. Aspinall got a second-round submission. It's funny because when I was watching this matchup, and I didn't think of this when I was doing film study on these guys for our preview, I tweeted out that Aspinall actually reminds me a lot of Andrei Arlovski, like a younger Andrei Arlovski, but just like bigger. Like if you took younger Andrei Arlovski and made him like 10 pounds bigger, like 2 inches taller, 10 pounds thicker, because he's a guy that he wins with speed, with athleticism, with boxing, and now suddenly you add in takedowns and grappling, and it was a quick back take. this is stuff that Andrei Arlovski did when he first showed up in the UFC. Do you see the comparison, or is that like, is it just because they were fighting each other?
No, I can see in kind of broad strokes how they bring some of the same weapons to the table. Yeah, it's just I love the ending, man. I'm sure all the people that had Aspinall by knockout before the midpoint of round 2, which was, pretty popular prop bet,
Sure,
were probably pretty upset when he decided to choke him out instead, when most heavyweights, most fighters period from that position probably would have just thrown 3 more punches. So some bettors are upset probably, and Andrei Arlovski's nose surgeon is probably upset because he was going to get a big payday if Aspinall threw those punches. But no, instead he went for the choke and just kind of reminded us that he actually was a grappler before he was a boxer. Like, it's just easy to forget that because once he decided to box, he got so good at it so quick.
Yeah. Yeah, and the reason why I believe he kind of went to the grappling was because suddenly he started slowing down, and that happens when you throw, I think Michael Bisping said 25 punches trying to knock a guy out. Like, we've seen people gas out trying to end it, and lost it to his credit is we've talked about his chin kind of having this roller coaster ride. It's still on the high. Like, Aspinall landed some good shots on him, and he didn't go down. He kind of, he shelled up a little bit, and it looked like it would have been a couple big shots. He kind of went to the body instead of throwing like the left hooks. He might have put him out, but to change it up when he knew he was kind of tiring, Arlovski was actually starting to find some momentum a little bit, especially very end of the first round, very beginning of the second round, to change it up, go for a takedown, and that back take was sweet. And when he got that choke in, he must have some grip because Arlovski tapped quick.
Yeah, and Arlovski, I also think he was just pissed. He's a veteran enough. He saw, probably what had been done to him, like how that last 15-second sequence when he was just, damn it, he was going to lose either way probably, but he didn't have to lose right then and there the way he did. So yeah, he looked like a little frustrated and upset at himself as well. The only thing I take away from Aspinall's performance, because it's a great performance, he started to kind of goof and showboat and finger wag a little bit late in the first round, which that doesn't bother me one way or the other. I mean, do it or don't. It only matters if it costs you the fight, or if you're the type of guy that dances around while he's actually losing rounds, which was not the case with Aspinall. But one thing that Arlovski still has left in him is he's still capable of really quick, dynamic, fluid movement in short bursts. He's not the guy that you want to play that with. So that's something that it's going to come back and sting him sooner or later if he keeps doing it, but didn't hurt him tonight, and he put on a great performance.
So before we move on to the other fight, Daukaus or Aspinall, who are you higher on?
Probably Aspinall still. Yeah, I think Aspinall has a better skill set, especially offensive skill set. He is a physically bigger dude. Yeah. I mean, we've seen both guys trim down a ton. Aspinall was pushing the 265 limit at least right before he came to the UFC. He's now weighing in, 244. And Daukaus, of course, obviously he's slimmed way down, but once you slim him all the way down, Aspinall's frame is bigger, and despite that, he's a more fluid athlete. Yeah,
I also like that we've seen both the stand-up and the ground of Aspinall, where we haven't seen the ground. Now, Daukaus is a black belt, but we saw with Charles Rosa, black belt means nothing. In between those two matchups, we had another very, very close contest. Some people were split on this. Phil Hawes versus Nasruddin Imavov. I apologize if I said his name wrong. I struggle with these names. So Hawes won a majority decision. He won the first 2 rounds, lost the third round 10-8. I'm actually okay with that. Like, I'm okay with the draw there. I didn't give it a draw. I gave it a 29-28 for Hawes. Did you score it for Hawes, or did you do the draw? Or?
I scored it for Hawes, gave him the first 2 rounds, gave Imavov the last round 10-9.
Yeah. So one thing we always like to say, like when we see a 3-round fight, and a guy starts slowing down in a 3-round fight, a lot of times we will say, well, if it was a 5-round fight, they probably lost. We get something. We say, well, guys, pump the brakes. It was only a 15-minute fight. If this was a 16-minute fight, Phil Hawes might have lost. If this was a 15 minutes and 30 seconds, like, he was saved by that. He was hurt, and he was hurt bad.
Yep.
I mean, he was at one point he was like he looked like he was on ice, like his legs were slipping out on him. He actually had to grab his opponent from keeping himself from falling. But what I'll say about this, the old Hawes, what I mean by the old Hawes, the guys who first showed up on the scene, on the Ultimate Fighter show, on the Contender Series, like kept having these losses, he would have lost those fights. He would have gotten knocked out. Like he found a way to dig in and to survive. So I'll give him credit for that. And I still like him because the chin is starting to be questionable. It really is starting to be questionable. But he has a good blend of striking and wrestling, and that's going to go away. Now, he's going to have to find a way to protect that chin. But overall, I still like him. And no, this guy's on a winning streak in the UFC.
He's on a win streak in the UFC. I liked at least his poise in the third round. You're right. I think the reps have definitely helped him. And on the flip side, Imavov, he could have finished that fight in the third round. He could have. I'm sure he will watch the tape tonight and be kicking himself. He'll be watching the tape 6 months from now and kick himself 2 years from now, because with just a little more seasoning, a few more reps, he could have found a way to finish that one. I mean, the last minute and a half of that round at least was Hawes just stumbling around the ring and just getting just desperation, like barely even clinched, just kind of getting his arms on him and kind of getting himself out of range that he could just keep getting teed off on. Just to name the two people that have beaten Hawes most recently, Lewis Taylor, certainly, like ultra wily veteran Lewis Taylor, or a guy like Julian Marquez, shucks him off and keeps kicking and punching him, and this thing is over. So yeah, we even said on the preview that Imavov might have a higher ceiling. They run this fight back 2 years from now, it might look completely different.
Yeah. And
it might not. I mean, Hawes is still improving as well. But yeah, like Hawes showed good instincts, good poise. He was hurt, he was tired, but Imavov also let it go. I think he could have finished this fight.
Yeah, so he's always going to beat people, with his speed. No one's going to be able to match his speed, match his power. But the guys who are crafty and who can take and beat, and just those, like, whoever the middleweight version of, like, a Darren Elkins is going to be a problem for Hawes. But overall, I mean, a win's a win, so it was a nice night. So that was the main card. Let's move over to the prelims. Here's a fight. I picked Danny Chavez. You picked Danny Chavez too, right?
Yeah, I picked Danny Chavez.
So this was a big swing and a miss for us, as Jared Gordon beat Danny Chavez in a pretty easy fashion, pretty pillar-to-post performance. Not a perfect weekend for Jared Gordon, as he did miss weight, so I'm going to throw that out there. But he just outworked him. He snuck in takedowns, some timely takedowns, and ground control. And to me, I think Michael Bisping was mentioning this, and he was mentioning about Caitlin Vera, but he kind of mentioned it with Dan Chavez. He was playing jiu-jitsu too much. Like, instead of trying to find openings to scramble, just to me, another good showing. I think that's 2 wins in a row that I was really impressed by Jared Gordon, where he's not the faster fighter. He's not very similar to what we just talked about Hawes. He's not faster. He's not as gifted. He's not technically sound, but he's just grimier. Like, he finds a way. He's more mentally strong. And just a really good performance by Jared Gordon. Yep.
I expected Chavez to handle Gordon. I just expected him to be too quick, too powerful, too explosive. I think I picked it to go to decision, but I wouldn't have been surprised if Chavez hurt him bad and found a way to finish him. But nope. He made Gordon look like a better wrestler than I thought Gordon was. So that might be a problem going forward for Chavez's prospects.
Yeah. Yeah, well, that's a good thing we talked about his last fight when he went against T.J. Brown. T.J. Brown comes from a wrestling background, and Chavez was stopping takedowns. And then suddenly Jared Gordon, who, he comes from a grappling background, but not a, high-level wrestling background, is getting takedowns. Yeah, that definitely disturbing. This is definitely one of the performances tonight that you're like, I might have been over-exaggerating how good this guy is. You want to move on to Eddie Wineland versus John Castaneda?
Sure. This is another one that I got really badly wrong.
So we had a nice stretch and then these two back-to-back kind of screwed with us a little bit.
Well, but I can tell you exactly how and why I was wrong. I gave Eddie Wineland a pass for the O'Malley knockout.
Yeah, so did I.
Wineland's striking style, where he's kind of like, he's not Anderson Silva, but in a shadow, like if you watch him like shadow box with hands low, kind of moving, using torso movement to get his head out of the way. It wasn't a style that was ever going to age that well once his reaction slowed, once his athleticism went. But O'Malley is lightning. He's going to do that to a lot of people before it's all said and done. So I didn't take that as an indication that Wineland's chin was gone or that Wineland was shot. But Castaneda, like, his punches hurt and rocked Wineland right away. And there's some guys, to me, the eternal example will always be Chuck Liddell, a guy who in his prime walked through fire and it wasn't a problem. And then all of a sudden it was a problem, and just anything square on the chin really, really scrambled him. And it looks to me like Eddie Wineland might be hitting that phase.
Yeah, I totally agree. So the chin to me is deteriorated when a guy like Castaneda, who's not really known for his punching power, hurts you, rocks you, puts you out. But also, as you talked about, he's got a very slip and rip style. When you have a slip and rip style, you really depend on moving your head, just getting out of range. If you lose any speed, punches that missed before start to land, and that's kind of something that happened with Chuck Liddell. And I've heard other fighters talk about it's not, I can't remember which fighter it was, and I apologize. But one of the fighters was saying it's not that the chin is deteriorated, it's that those punches that you would avoid before now will land. So those same punches would have knocked you out before, they just didn't land. And I think that's the question. I hope this is the last we see Eddie Wineland. He's been in it a long time. He's got another job. He's got a good job. He's a fireman. He's done enough in sport. I'm sure he could open up his own gym. He could be a coach, like whatever he wants to do. He's got plenty of experience. Either he gets cut or just retires. Like, I don't want to see him fight anymore. Yeah.
I mean, the guy's been he's been at Duneland Valley Tudo for, I think, like 15 years. Presumably they'd like to have him in on the weekends to teach him classes.
Yeah. So as far as Castaneda, like, we just kind of ignored him. I don't see him winning a lot of fights in the UFC. Like, I think this is a high point of his career.
Yeah, this is a referendum on Wineland rather than Castaneda. Castaneda appears to be the same guy he was in Combate, and he wasn't that great even in Combate. He'll stick around for a few more fights now. He can probably lose at least 2 more in a row after this and be fine, but this is his ceiling.
Yeah, and another reason why is Wineland was winning. Like, Wineland was actually piecing him up early. Now, to Castaneda's credit, he's a counter striker. He was sitting back. He was trying to pull him into his punch, and he did. He pulled him right into a perfect shot and knocked him out. Before that, speaking of perfect shots, there wasn't, because of the knockouts and how many crazy knockouts there wasn't a fight of the night. I don't know if this would have won fight of the night, but it was the most fun for a short period of time. And this is what we kind of expected when we said both these guys are very aggressive. Julian Erosa versus Nate Landwehr. Julian Erosa won by first round knockout. Flying knee knockout. I can't believe he didn't get a performance bonus. The fight was an absolute banger. Both guys were rocked. I know Erosa got knocked down, similar to his last fight against Sean Woodson, where he was hurt, got up, seemed even more pissed off, then rocked Landwehr. Landwehr was kind of like, on skates, and then he throws his flying knee. This is 2 wins in a row. Now, Julian Erosa, I think we both kind of feel a little Castaneda, not that he's going to ever make a run, but he's always going to be fun based on his style and his, like, him getting hurt. Like, he gets hurt often. So, like, it's either going to knock somebody out or he's going to get knocked out. And he's willing to brawl. Like, I love watching Julian Erosa fight.
So do I. On paper, I picked Landwehr by first round knockout, so it looks as though I couldn't have got this any more wrong. But I was pretty right about the way the fight ended up playing out.
Were.
I expected Erosa's would be the chin that gave out. It was Landwehr's. I'm not mad. That was an extremely fun 56 seconds. And you're right. And all Erosa needs to do is fight like this and at least win one, lose one, win one, lose one, and he could stick around for a while. I pointed out ahead of this that he has to have some sort of record as not only a guy who's on his 3rd stint in the UFC, but he is now joined through tough through Contender Series and through just like a regular signing. That's got to be some kind of like unique trifecta. But if you can just win one, lose one for a while and keep being this exciting, I mean, ask Lando Veneta like how long that'll keep you in the UFC.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. And I did pick this one right, but if I can't take too much credit because if you remember on the previous show, this is one where I flip-flopped like 4 times in my pick, and then the only reason I ended up picking Arosa is because you picked Landwehr. So I said, well, let's make it interesting. So
you're welcome.
Yeah. Before that, we had Shayna Dobson welcoming Casey O'Neill to the UFC, and Casey
welcoming her like my front door welcomes me.
Yeah,
it just kind of got out of the way and facilitated the, the entry.
It was that nice mat that said like, everyone has in front of the house that says like friends and family welcome, or come inside and be our friend. I don't know, whatever the hell your stupid mat says in front of your house. I'm sure my wife has something like that, like flowers or something on it. Casey O'Neill looked fantastic. It was, she went against Shayna Dobson. So I'm going to pump the brakes a little bit because, people are going crazy for her on Twitter. But what I love about her is that I think she's 23. Like, she's really young. She's doesn't have a lot of experience. But she made a short run, went against Shayna Dobson. And I liked some of the intelligence I saw about her. Like, I talked about intelligence and Chris Dawkins that stood out to me. Same thing with Casey O'Neill. Like, when she got the takedown, she had incredible ground control, incredible hip control. But 2 things really jumped out to me. It was at the very end of the first round and the very end of the second round. I'll tell you what stand out to me. She's winning the first round. It's in the bag. There's about the 10-second clapper comes, so there's only 10 seconds, and then she drops down on a heel hook. I absolutely love that. Because what I loved about it is I hate when people drop on heel hooks. So we've talked about it before. It's you hardly ever see it work. And then you take damage. I've seen people lose rounds, lose fights because of it. But when there's 10 seconds, you already have the round won. You can pull off. If you do hit a heel hook, you can pull it off in 10 seconds. But the chances of the opponent getting on top of you and putting you out in 10 seconds is very rare. So I like the risk there. So that's one intelligent. But what I also love is when she had the mount in different dominant positions, she wasn't looking for submissions. She was punching because so many times people punch, and they feel like it's not working, and then they'll they'll look for a submission or something. If the referee's telling you, show me something, that means they're close to stop it. Just keep punching. And she did that. Even though they weren't even the hardest shots. Just the intelligence to know that, especially at a young age, those 2 things that really jumped out to me. What did you think about performance?
I agree, and I liked the way she finished the first round looking for that leg lock, because I like someone going for that low percentage leg lock at the end of a round that they're winning. Like, I didn't like Charles Rosa ending a round that he'd gotten dominated, by going for one of those low percentage submissions. But if you're already winning the round, it's like being a basketball player and just shooting the half court shot as the buzzer goes off. Like, hey, what do you got to lose? I liked that she leaned on her ground game in general. Like the specific that she chose to punish Dobson rather than just go straight for a choke or something. That definitely as well. But just in general, I think we agreed that most of what Dobson had to offer her in terms of threat was punching power. Like, she's not a lights out hitter, but she's a pretty solid hitter. She's a pretty good boxer. O'Neill's good everywhere, but we knew that the ground game was probably going to be her greater her spot of greatest advantage. And I will expect her to be this smart going forward. She's super young, but she comes from a fight family, like Eternal MMA, which is one of the better promotions in Australia and Australasia right now, is her family business. Like, her dad runs it. She had quite a few amateur fights, some wins as well as some losses. So, she's been through some adversity, and she's probably going to be about as composed and poised a 23 or 22-year-old as you're going to find. Mm-hmm. And then physically, she looks great. Like, she's big, strong, well muscled already for how young she is. Cautiously, I'm going to say she's a problem.
Yeah, she's a young fighter with a fighting family who runs promotions. who's a foreigner. It sounds like that the movie with The Rock, Fighting with My Family, the WWE movie. It's like the MMA's version. So maybe 10 years from now they'll have the same version, and then she'll get to meet Conor McGregor. That'll be the scene where they meet Conor or something. So you mentioned, I'll move on, but one last comment. You mentioned Shannon Dobson, known for her punching power. She did kind of light her up a little bit in the brief exchange on the feet, so I do want to see some improvement in her striking. So I'm hoping to see that, but at least one side looks very good. Before that, we had Chaz Skelly versus Jamal Emmers. Kind of. Chaz Skelly got in the cage, and Jamal Emmers never did because he pulled out with muscle spasms, back spasms, which is a serious thing. I don't want to downplay that. It's something we've never seen. And it's just kind of, this moment was just that reminding of all the weird things we've had. Excuse me. Weigh-in day was an absolute disaster for this event. We had many fighters miss weight. I know Ketlin Vieira missed weight. Jared Gordon missed weight. Rafael's didn't even try to make weight as he set the all-time record for biggest miss. And then a couple hours before, we had Drakkar Klose versus Luis Pena, which was supposed to headline. I believe that was the one that was going to headline the prelims. That fight gets scrapped because someone in Drakkar Klose's camp got COVID, which is normal at this point. Like, we're kind of used to that. We're just saying, and then this happened. I want to correct something because they kept getting brought up. They kept saying, this is the first time someone's ever entered the cage and was not allowed to fight or didn't fight. That's not true. I want to go all the way back to UFC 3, where Royce Gracie and Harold Howard were in the cage, and Royce Gracie's team threw in the towel, and Harold Howard never got the fight. And I still, to this day, think that should be a win for Harold Howard. If your corner throws in the towel, that should be a win. But anyways, what's your thoughts? Just weird.
I'm surprised that doesn't happen more often. I don't know. I'm not Jamal Emmers' doctor, but that's something that happens a lot with weight cutting. Your sodium and potassium get a little out of balance, and you get muscle spasms, cramps. Some of them they're excruciating, dude.
Absolutely.
I've had them before, like in my legs and my back. I didn't want to stand up and take a piss, let alone go fight somebody. I don't blame them one bit. And Skelly gave us every bit as awkward an interview as he would if he had actually won the fight. So we got that gold, and was trying to make a fight with Luis Pena. He was like, is Luis Pena still in the building?
Yeah.
Wanted to fight him, weight class be damned, which would have been fun.
Yeah. And I think that's it. I think it was, and Luis Pena was thrown out of him too. Like, they both were down. Before that, Ayman Zahabi faced Draco Rodriguez. Ayman Zahabi won by first round knockout. I forgot that Draco also missed weight, so that was the other person I forgot that missed weight. Not a good debut for Draco, as he missed weight, and then Ayman Zahabi absolutely destroyed him with one punch. Zahabi wasn't really doing anything until he was, and it was one perfectly overhand right, and it was another brutal knockout.
And it's funny because obviously he is a TriStar guy. He is the younger brother of the head coach. And I kind of said, in the striking, at least, he's not your complete stereotypical TriStar guy. And this was not a TriStar performance. Don't do a whole lot. And the right hook, it actually went like underneath Rodriguez's arm, but just Rodriguez was in the middle of throwing this ridiculous tiger uppercut, and Zahabi clipped him first, and man, it got surpassed, but that would have been knockout of the night most nights.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And before that, we had heavyweight clash, Sergey Spivak versus Jared Vanderaa. Be careful what you ask for. He, on the Contender Series, he called for this fight against Sergey Spivak, and Sergey Spivak is levels ahead of Jared Vanderaa. I might be saying his name wrong.
I think it's Vanderaa.
Vanderaa, I apologize.
Yeah.
Spivak just mauled him, took him down, beat him up. Did it again in the first round. I have nothing else to say. Be careful what you ask for.
Be careful what you ask for. And it's not it's not a good look for Vanderon. Not just to call somebody out and then lose, but Spivak's not that good a wrestler. I still distinctly remember him just getting buried by Marcin Tybura. But Vanderon made Spivak look like D1 Spivak, and Spivak was mean on top. I don't normally think of him as like an ill-intentioned fighter, like they're all there to beat each other up, but that ending was it was a mauling, dude.
Yep. Now there you guys have it. We've covered the entire card. Let's do the fun stuff. Let's do the Bulls and the Bears first this time. The Bulls and Bears, if you're not familiar with it, it's a stock market reference where if a stock is rising, it's a bull stock or a bull market. If it is falling, it's a bear stock or a bear market. We do this hockey style. We can have 3, 2, 1 like Stars in the Night. You want to do Bulls or Bears first?
Let's do Bulls.
All right, we'll do Bulls first. So this is a good one. I'm going to let you take the reins first. Who are your 3 Bulls starting from 3 down to 1?
Oh, number 3, meaning my least bullish, but still worth mentioning. Ayman Zahabi. It's funny to me that the booth kept calling him a prospect we can't wait to see more of. 'Cause he's 33 years old. It's more like he's a veteran who only fights once every 20 months. But nonetheless, came back and against all expectations, looked sensational against Draco Rodriguez, whom I still believe in as a prospect. I think Draco Rodriguez is going to do well in the UFC, but Zahabi came back with a sensational knockout. Missed me with this is a prospect. He's 33 years old, but certainly would like to see him more than once every 2 years. Number 2, Yana Kunitskaya. Even if I don't completely agree with the decision, she looked better than I expected her to. So she's in a spot where, hey, carpe diem. You did win the fight. We just kind of discussed what a vacuum there is above her in the division. Couldn't have done much better for herself, with such a good performance at, the right time. Number 1, losing weight.
Okay.
Number of fighters on this card who have significantly reshaped their bodies within the course of the last 12 to 18 months all looked sensational. And all the way from the more shocking, obvious ones like Aspinall, Dawkins, all the way up to Derek Lewis looked a little slim. Derek did not, he says it, it's one of his charms. He says it every camp. My back feels better. I had my best camp ever. I believe him. I just don't think it means much, relatively speaking. But he actually did look good, and it carried him to the biggest win of his career.
Yeah, it was great for showing. So I get to my Bulls. Number 3, I'm going to go with Casey O'Neill. She's 23 years old, got a huge win. Just the way Twitter's reacting. Europeans love to back their people. She's got Scotland connection. She also has an Australia-New Zealand connection. She kind of has everything covered. Really great performance. My number 2, I'm going to go with new heavyweights, and really new heavyweight contenders, I should say. And I'm going to put the 2 together, or kind of been matching them together the whole podcast. And that's Chris Dawkins and Tom Aspinall. Both won against, former champion Andrei Arlovski, somewhat legendary fighter, and Alexei Oleinik, guys with way more experience. They both got spectacular wins. They are now both combined with a 6-0 with 6 stoppages. So that's some nice blood to a division that we've been calling for new blood in. So that's good. But my number 1 is going to be counter strikers, and it's specifically counter strikers getting knockouts. I'll go with Castaneda, Zahabi, and Derek Lewis. All 3 guys sitting back on their punches, trying to pull people into their power, and all 3 landed the big shots, pulling people into their power. You know me, we've talked about this before. I prefer the more aggressive, moving forward strikers. But when you see the counter strikers, when it works, it's a fun thing to see, and it's usually the counter strikers that land the more devastating ones because you really pull a person into your power. All right, let's move over to the Bears. Now, this is, I think, are the biggest losers. And I don't want to, without calling them losers, but saying their stock lost the most. I'll go first. I'm going to say Charles Rose's Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. It's been twice now that Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt got absolutely mauled on the ground. 10-8 round multiple times. Not a good look for one of my own New Englanders, Charles Rosa. Number 2, I'm going to go Ketlin Vieira. She was a big favorite. She was in the co-main event. They were kind of setting up. If she won, she might be the person we'd be saying get a title shot. She's now lost 2 out of her last 3, both to ranked fighters. She's going the wrong way in the rankings right now. Not good. And this is after that long layoff. So, but my number 1 is going to be the refereeing tonight. I thought the referees had some extremely late stoppages. I'm going to give Herb Dean a pass on the Derek Lewis one. You want to create your space from the fighters so they can move and land, and it costs those guys. You definitely don't want to make sure you get hurt. So I'm going to give him a pass on that one. I kind of blame Derek. I think the punches from Derek Lewis are a little unnecessary. I know Jorge Masvidal might see otherwise, but I'm going to give Herb Dean a pass. But him and Chris Taglioni tonight I thought was awful. First, I'll start with Herb Dean in the Dawkins fight. Dawkins was teeing off against Alexei Oleinik against the cage. I think he landed about 10 unnecessary shots against the cage. That's an aging fighter getting hit by a heavyweight, unnecessary. And then Chris Taglioni, I thought Jared Vanderaa took way too many shots from Sergey Spivak, and Shayna Dobson took way too many shots from Casey O'Neill. I think both those fights should have been stopped way earlier. So to me, I think it was a really, really bad night by the refereeing. And it seems like with these two guys, it's been a theme lately, especially Chris Taglioni. Who are your Bears?
For one, I agree with all of yours, but for the sake of just variety and coverage, I'll go Draco Rodriguez, kind of the flip side of talking about Ayman Zahabi. Rodriguez came in with a lot of steam. He steamrolled a local Houstonian and a prospect that I'm still very high on in Mana Martinez on the Contender Series. For that reason, he's going to get more chances, but I feel like I say this every week. This is an era in the UFC where if you can show up, make weight, win in spectacular fashion, you can kind of skip the line to stardom. And several fighters have done that. You don't get a second chance to make a first impression. He'll be back, but he won't get this one back. Number 2, Eddie Wineland. This is now, again, that he's just gotten short-circuited. He always was just an incredibly tough, gritty fighter, was able to rely on his chin quite a bit. I didn't think so after the O'Malley fight, but after this fight, I'm like, he maybe should have some thought for his future. At least have the conversation. Number 1, Alexei Oleinik. I am happy for Chris Dawkins. He looked great. He is doing so much better in the UFC than I would have pegged him to a year ago. But Oleinik, he's a 75-fight veteran, and he was like the anti-Mark Hunt, though. Where Hunt everyone knew he had a head like a block of granite, and it took a surprisingly long time for his chin to finally give out on him. Oleinik got to this point by figuring out a way to fight that did not get his chin tested very often on his way up. He did not take many clean knockouts in his first 60 fights. He's never been a super fast twitch athlete, always been kind of herky-jerky on the feet, but just really good at making his game work without taking punishment. That's not the case anymore. He's taken several really scary knockouts in the last couple of years, and this was as scary as any. It wasn't as spectacular, but it was grim and depressing to watch for the reasons that you mentioned. It could have and should have been stopped earlier.
All right, so there's your Bulls and the Bears. Let's get to the cut list. The cut list is basically where we say who shouldn't be in the UFC anymore. To be an official pick for the Shillan and Duffy recap cut list, you have to be on both our lists. We both have to be in agreement. So if you're not on both of us, we say you actually survive. I have one person. Do you have more than one?
I have one person.
All right. How about on this? On the count of 3, we see if we're the same person. 3, 2, 1. Eddie Wineland.
Eddie Wineland.
There you go. Sorry, Eddie Wineland. He's lost 4 out of 5. I would rather see him just retire. But
he's 6-9 in the UFC. He was a WEC champ. He's 6-9 in the UFC.
Yeah, it's time. It's time to hang it up. And the last question, and I'll let you throw this out there. What is your grade for the card?
Gonna give this card an A minus. This thing was like a 747, like with 3 engines gone, trailing fire and smoke, just pulling into the airport. It lost 3 fights in the last 36 hours, and it could have lost more. There were a couple of serious weight misses that went ahead and fought. For all that, incredibly entertaining, super violent. My bias just going to shine through. It does make me happy that Derek Lewis, won, partly because he's so much older. Blaydes will get more chances, but it's a feel good win for me. And yeah, this is one for the highlight reels. Fun times.
Yeah. So before the event started, this looked like it was going to be an F between the amount of fights there were, the fact that there wasn't too many fights that mattered in the rankings, other than the main and the co-main event, and I guess the 2 other heavyweights a little bit. But then the weird things that happened, the weight cuts, all this. It looked like it was going to be an F, but then the actual action absolutely delivered. I mean, when you have a flying knee knockout, it doesn't even get a performance bonus. That tells you how good it was. We had some controversy, in the co-main event. We had like a historical moment with Chaz Skelly. We had crazy knockouts. I'm going to give it an A, and the only reason why I'm not giving it an A plus is for one reason. Derek Lewis didn't say anything funny in his post-fight interview. So because of that, it does not get an A plus. If he says something really funny, I would give it an A plus. But there you guys have it. There's our grades. And there is our show. We just recapped UFC Vegas 19, Lewis versus Blaydes card. We'll be back this week. We'll be previewing UFC Vegas 20. That is the Jairzinho Rozenstruik Surreal Gone fight. Ben, I hope you have a wonderful night, and let's get ready to do a preview in a couple days.
You too, sir. Have a good night, everybody.
And all you guys listening, thank you so much for listening. All the people in the chat, have a great night.